Chapter 29, Old Friends. Lockjaw felt Saberclaw's whole body begin shaking, and he let her sink to the ground. He laid her on the ground, but held her head up and ripped the dart out of her. Lockjaw's eyes frantically looked from Saberclaw's blank expression to the dart. He kneeled, supporting Saberclaw's head, and he was holding her when her body began to shake violently. He rubbed his finger against the side of her face and asked with fear, "Saber? Saberclaw, can you hear me?" he exclaimed. He leaned over her and barely heard her whisper. There, she pointed to her right, and Lockjaw followed her gaze. He saw a Nextari soldier step out of the woods with a crossbow-like weapon loaded with another dart. The Nextari, who had armor scarcely placed over his grayish-blue body, laughed at Lockjaw. Lockjaw bared his teeth and glared at the Nextari soldier, but made sure to keep Saberclaw's head steady. "Oh, Lockjaw, you have really lost your sanity now, buddy. You betrayed Her Highness, and now I will be literally paid if I bring yours or Saberclaw's head. Twice as much if I bring both," the Nextari said as he continued laughing. About 5 other soldiers stepped out of the shadows as well, cackling as they stood beside their comrade. Lockjaw's voice had reached an unfamiliar tone of angry as he hissed, "Are you really going to turn me in? What did you do to Saberclaw? Where is the cure?" He seemed familiar with this group of aliens. The Nextari with the dart-launching weapon laughed again and responded, "This is the lady you said was worth dying for? PFFF, you have gone insane, Lockjaw. And there is no cure, buddy. She won't make it unless you bleed her dry. Just think, you could have been happily celebrating with the 6 of us if you hadn't fallen for this rebel. It's sad, honestly." The alien sighed with fake pity and watched Lockjaw's face shift through emotions. Lockjaw angrily gave the alien a death glare, but he looked back at Saberclaw's face. She was clearly in pain, and her body was still shaking intensely. He noticed his own hands shaking with fear for Saberclaw's life as he raised them to his communication unit. Lockjaw looked at Saberclaw and gently comforted her as he spoke into the device. "Silver Spot, this is Lockjaw, and I need you to respond now," he yelled, too frantic to use the correct radio language. Silver Spot's concerned voice echoed through the static. "I can hear you, Lockjaw. What's wrong?" Lockjaw watched as Saberclaw's condition worsened. "Silver Spot, I am with Saberclaw and you have my coordinates, right?" he asked. "Yes. What is happening?" She sounded suspicious. "Come right now and bring your medical kit." "Lockjaw, she's dying. Poison. Bring Razorwing, too." "I don't know what to do," he cried. "All right, I'm coming. Hold on. Razorwing, and I will be there soon." Silver Spot sounded calm, but concerned when she cut off the connection. Lockjaw could feel Saberclaw losing strength as she asked, "Lockjaw, you can't fight all of them." "Too many dash," she began, but was interrupted by the blue robot who was holding her. He was trying to sound calm for her, but he was clearly unsure. "No, I can handle it, and you need to save your strength." He looked back up at the Nextari. The soldier in the middle of the group put his 6-fingered hands on the sides of his face with sarcasm. "Oh no, save your strength. She's dying," he mocked, and the other laughed. Another Nextari laughed and spoke to Lockjaw. "Your backup won't have anyone to back up when they arrive," he smiled cruelly. Lockjaw ignored him and slowly braced Saberclaw up against the large tree. Saberclaw, pushing through the intense burning sensation, spoke loudly as she scolded the Nextari. "Shut up." She angrily glared at them, and they sarcastically acted afraid. Lockjaw made sure she was as comfortable as he could get her, then he stood back up slowly. He stepped away from Saberclaw, and his eyes hardened as his tone became deadly. "I guess friendship with Nextari soldiers doesn't last. Let's get this over with then." He took his double-bladed spear off of his back, and it glowed dangerously. He spread his wings, making him look twice his actual size. One of the Nextari soldiers readied himself to attack, and he sighed, "Ah, I thought our friendship was going well until you decided to betray Queen Rebay. But to be honest, I always wanted to know what it felt like to destroy a criminal." He lunged at Lockjaw, and the other 5 followed. Lockjaw spun his spear in his hands and knocked one of the soldiers to the side, temporarily stunning him. Another tried to shoot him from behind, but Lockjaw grabbed a soldier and held him up as a shield. The body shook from the struggle, then went limp after the blast collided with it. Lockjaw dropped the now deceased Nextari soldier and whirled around, putting his hands in front of him and blocking yet another attack. Sparks flew as the currently attacking soldier scoffed. "You won't win, Lockjaw. There are 5 of us and 1 of you." He slashed at Lockjaw and was punched. Lockjaw grunted when he felt another body slam into his side. Lockjaw placed his foot behind him, balancing himself as he forced the soldier off of him. He grunted as another alien jumped on his back, wrapping his arms around Lockjaw's neck. A third Nextari grabbed Lockjaw's arm and pulled downward, forcing him to kneel. The first Nextari stopped shoving Lockjaw backwards and held Lockjaw down by his originally free arm. Lockjaw tried to stand up, but couldn't due to the 3 soldiers holding him down. The third soldier behind him was holding his wings in place and making sure that Lockjaw couldn't fly away. The fourth Nextari stood beside the others, ready to pounce if Lockjaw escaped. The soldier with the darts stepped forward and leaned down to Lockjaw's level. "Before we destroy you, I have a quick question. What is so great about that rebel called Saberclaw?" he asked with a taunting tone. Lockjaw angrily locked eyes with the Nextari and answered with an exhausted sigh. "She is kind and pure and gave me a chance when no one else would, and I won't lose her again," he yelled and managed to shake the soldier, holding his right arm off. This gave Lockjaw just enough freedom to stand and throw the others off of him. He gripped his spear and slashed at the soldier with the darts. The blade struck the Nextari. Purple blood gushed from the tear, and the soldier cried out in pain. He clutched his side and fell to his knees as he tried to cope. Lockjaw didn't have time to view his small victory because the other 3 immediately attacked him. There were now 4 uninjured and alive soldiers, but one of them had gone to drag his injured companion to safety, and the other 3 had continued the assault. Lockjaw swung again, but the dull end of the blade knocked one of the 3 soldiers into a nearby tree. Another Nextari jumped on Lockjaw, and the 2 toppled over. Lockjaw struggled and showed his metal teeth as he blocked the alien with his spear. The alien smiled psychotically as Lockjaw struggled to deflect his attacks. After a few seconds, Lockjaw realized he was losing the fight and was about to be struck by the alien. Suddenly, the smile was wiped off of the alien's face and the corners of his mouth dripped with blood. The alien's body rolled off of Lockjaw, and the robot looked at the body with amazement and confusion. He definitely wasn't the one who took out the soldier. Lockjaw's gaze fell upon the back of the dead alien and saw the green dagger sticking out of the unprotected skin. Lockjaw, knowing who the dagger belonged to, looked up at the tree where Saberclaw was laying. The green robot had her hands stretched out and her jaw clenched tightly. She had thrown the dagger and struck down the alien while he was focused on Lockjaw. Saberclaw, who was very weak, rested her body again and smiled. "You're welcome." She let her hand fall gently onto her torso and the other on the ground. Lockjaw only nodded in response because he knew he didn't have time to thank her. There were now 2 soldiers left, and Lockjaw already had many minor injuries that sapped the strength from him. Lockjaw's right wing fell, but the other stayed up as he glared at the 2 remaining Nextari and clutched his right shoulder. The 2 of them stared at him with pure hatred, and he returned this gesture, but Lockjaw could see the hesitation and fear on the Nextari soldiers' faces. "You 2 can collect the bodies of your comrades and leave. I will allow you to live." Lockjaw's words caused mixed reactions from the aliens. They looked at each other, ready to attack, but they stopped and slowly moved towards the bodies of the other soldiers. The one with the injury could walk on his own, and the other 2 dragged the bodies behind them. Lockjaw watched each one closely and was ready to attack if they made any sudden moves. The aliens continued to face him until they were a few yards away. The one with the injury turned and spoke with a heavy voice. "We were your only friends, Lockjaw, and you fought us like enemies. Shame on you. Now you know that we will face the wrath of Rebay for failure." He glared before turning around again and walking away behind the others. Lockjaw's strong body language didn't cease as he responded coldly. "Yes, and you can still choose to fight me and attempt to complete your mission. I am letting you live because you are my friends." He lowered his head a little as the soldier paused, considering his words. The next Hari waved him off and sighed, "Whatever." He followed the others, and they were soon out of sight. Lockjaw's body relaxed, causing his arms to fall and his wings to drop. He sighed and felt just how exhausted he was. He never wanted to fight off 6 soldiers at once again. Then, he remembered that Saberclaw was still poisoned and waiting for him. His eyes widened a little, and he whirled around to see Saberclaw had sunk back into the dirt. He rushed to her side and grabbed her hand, raising it up to his chest and holding it with both hands. His eyes darted over her weak body, and he stared at her longingly. Lockjaw looked over Saberclaw's body and asked, "How are you doing? I saw you save me back there. Did that take too much effort?" He sounded more panicked than he intended to sound. Saberclaw's green paint was covered in dirt as well as his own blue paint, but hers seemed more dull and not as bright and full of life as it previously did. Her wings stretched by her head, completely relaxed and unrestricted. The glow of her eyes was flickering and dull, but her ego was still clearly intact. "Yeah, I did. And you didn't even thank me. I forgive you for that." She looked like she wanted to say more, but her mouth stopped moving and her head slipped a little. Lockjaw heard the flapping of metal wings and felt the wind on his back. Silver Spot, who had just landed, immediately rushed to Saberclaw's other side and brought out a few tools. Razorwing's voice was heard to Lockjaw's side. "Where did the soldiers go? I saw them leave, and they deserve to perish," he ranted and didn't even try to quiet himself. Lockjaw turned to him with shiny eyes and explained calmly, "I let them go, Razorwing, and I promised them that they would live, so don't go after them." He knew this wouldn't go over well, but he didn't have the heart to lie. Lockjaw stood up, only to be yelled at. "Lockjaw, are you insane? Look at you. They clearly beat you up too, and you just let them go. Look at what they did to Saber. Why did you let them go?" Razorwing demanded and pointed to Saberclaw. Lockjaw closed his eyes and lowered his head in shame. He didn't regret his decision to let the aliens live, but he did regret that he couldn't protect Saberclaw better. Because of this, he didn't want to look at Saberclaw as she fought for her life. He didn't look Razorwing in the eyes, but he answered, "They were my friends before I switched sides. They were the only ones I could trust, and they even saved me from the wrath of Rebay multiple times. They didn't deserve to die if they didn't want to. I did end 2 of them, and one of them was severely injured, but I told them they could leave with their lives or risk everything to continue fighting me. They chose the first option and will probably give the dead soldiers a proper burial, or something like that." He explained, but that seemed to make Razorwing even more angry. Razorwing opened his mouth, about to continue yelling his opinion. Silver Spot spoke first. "He did what was right, Razorwing. I would have done the same thing. Besides, as you said, look at him. He probably wouldn't have survived 2 more aliens fighting him. So, I don't want to hear another word out of you." She scolded him with zero fear. Lockjaw let out a sigh of relief. He felt extreme anger towards Razorwing and desperately wanted to insult him, but he knew Saberclaw wouldn't have wanted such things. Just before the attack, she had told him that she didn't approve of his treatment towards Razorwing, and Lockjaw wanted to respect her wishes. Razorwing closed his mouth and huffed, glaring at Lockjaw as he walked over to crouch beside Silver Spot. Silver Spot changed the subject and asked Lockjaw, "Did they say anything about a cure? This is clearly poison that I am not familiar with." She sounded grave, but not discouraged. Lockjaw returned to Saberclaw's side, and his massive frame seemed to soften when he touched her hand again. "They said there was no cure, but to save her, we would have to bleed her dry." "What does that mean?" he asked. Razorwing tilted his head with confusion, but Silver Spot's face fell and her eyes widened a little. She rummaged in her box of tools, but didn't answer Lockjaw, and this made him begin to panic a little. "Silver, what does that mean?" he asked quickly. Silver Spot brought out a very sharp-looking knife and multiple bags of G that glowed gently. Lockjaw saw this equipment and got a bad feeling about what was going to happen next. Silver Spot finally answered him. "It means I will have to make a small cut and let her bleed the poison out of her body. This is an extremely dangerous technique, but it might be the only thing that can save Saberclaw. Now, you two just promise me you won't go into shock before I start." She picked up the knife and pressed it against Saberclaw's upper arm. She clenched her jaw as the blade sliced through the armor like butter, and G began pouring out. She cut a few more small areas, and a pool of G began forming around Saberclaw's body. Silver Spot skillfully grabbed a few packets of fresh G and connected them to a small tube with a needle on the end. She stabbed the needle into Saberclaw's arm and occasionally switched out the packets when they were out of G, laying the empty packets on the ground. Lockjaw's hand shook as he watched the process progress. Razorwing watched as well, clearly trying to hide his concern behind a calm mask. Lockjaw also watched Saberclaw's face closely. She had been unconscious and still seemed to be, but she was clearly in pain and her face was twitching a little. After 30 minutes of waiting with tension thick in the air, Razorwing asked Silver Spot, "Is there a way we could move this back to the hangar? It would be safer there. We're kind of out in the open here." His voice shook as he asked, and he hoped Silver Spot would consider his offer for a little while. However, she answered immediately, "No, if we move her right now, it could increase the risk. If we are to do that, which we will eventually, she will have to be conscious first." She replaced the empty pouch of G again with little emotion and then observed Saberclaw's condition closely. Saberclaw was still deeply unconscious, but her levels were stable. Silver Spot also knew that Saberclaw wasn't the only one struggling. She looked up and checked on Lockjaw. He was sitting beside Saberclaw loyally and had refused to leave her side. His right shoulder and wing still drooped more than his left side, but he was ignoring it and staring blankly into the forest. Silver Spot put her hands on her knees, propelling herself onto her feet. She walked over to Lockjaw and sat beside him. Lockjaw seemed to not notice her, and they both stared into the forest. Silver Spot was about to say something when Lockjaw asked, "Are you sure I did the right thing?" He spoke to Silver Spot, but didn't move his gaze toward her. She sighed and smiled a little. "Well, what you did was the more mature option. I'm not sure if it was the right one. Either way, what is done, Lockjaw." Her tone seemed laid back and calm, but Lockjaw was still tense. He still stared forward, but said, "I feel like I should have protected her better. She spotted the soldiers before I did, Silver Spot." He trailed off, not knowing what else to say. Silver Spot chuckled a little and put her hand on his left shoulder. Lockjaw, of course she noticed them first. She was literally shot by them, not you. Besides, she would have noticed them anyway because she has abilities we don't have. "Did she go quiet moments before she was hit?" she asked with curiosity. Finally, Lockjaw snapped out of his trance and looked at her with confusion. "Yes, but what does that have to do with anything?" he asked. Silver Spot smiled and answered, "Ah, that makes sense. She has telekinesis, yes, but she has other things that sort of come with that talent that she chooses not to point out for some reason. I have gathered information that suggests she can sense people's presences before they even arrive. She has done it to me multiple times, and it makes her almost impossible to ambush." She laughed a little as she pictured memories of Saberclaw catching her before a training stunt. Lockjaw looked at Saberclaw's resting face and questioned, "Then, why did she not tell me that they were there?" He seemed worried. Silver Spot shrugged. "I don't know. You can ask her when she wakes up, she began, but was interrupted by Lockjaw. "If she wakes up, you mean?" He squeezed Saberclaw's hand and pressed his lips together. Silver Spot straight up laughed at him and exclaimed, "Ha! Saberclaw's been shot down, stabbed, blown up, poisoned, and lots of other things. I highly doubt this will be the thing that ends her. You're too young to be worrying this much, Lockjaw. Let me handle the worrying." She stood up and walked back to her set of tools, checking on Saberclaw as well.